This is Bob, also known as SpongeBob. Bob is a 15-year-old Appaloosa. He's been used for the program here for about 9 years. Prior to that, he was a Girl Scout horse, so he's had lots of experience with lots of different types of riders. Justin, if you want to go ahead and put him out on a circle. Looking at Bob in profile as he's standing there, you can kind of notice that he's got a little bit higher neck set. The way that his neck comes out of his shoulder is a little bit higher and straighter than some of the other horses. So as he goes around, you can see when he walks, he still continues to hold his head and neck up just a little bit. As he comes past us, you can then see that he's fairly rigid through his back, from about his withers through his mid-thoracic. He stays very still. A good note to notice on Bob when he walks is that he has a very methodical gait. It's very consistent, but it's very up and down. Bob doesn't have a lot of driving force forward, so if you watch his pelvis stays rather rigid, and he's not getting a good rotation or a good anterior-posterior push that your rider would want. He's got a lot of motion in an up-down kind of direction. So if you watch his hind feet, especially to this direction, you can watch the leg that's wrapped in purple, the inside. When he steps forward, you can see that he kind of almost stabs the ground with his hind feet. There's not a lot of drive forward. It's a very up and down motion. And if you watch the joint, his hock joint, right above the wrap, you can see that he bends it minimally and then places the whole leg forward and kind of goes straight up and down. So that's the motion that's translating into your rider. Again, if you watch his back, he keeps his back fairly rigid. So the motion that you're getting, it feels like a lot of motion, but it's in one plane. It's kind of an up-down. You can trot, Justin. So there you notice that as Bob accelerated his speed, he put his head up. So instead of putting his head down and picking his back up and getting a nice rolling gait, he gets choppier. So his hind stride actually gets a little bit shorter. Again, you can watch his purple leg is a good example. His hind purple leg is a good example of kind of stabbing into the ground, and it's a lot of up and down motion. He's kind of got a short stride when he trots. And his back, if you watch, it kind of just bounces straight up and down. Good, Justin, you can have him walk. And we'll just have him walk out a little bit once he gets his regular walking gait. Good, so you can see that as Justin walks him forward, he still maintains that higher head set, and you kind of see him just taking short steps, but he quickens them rather than lengthening his stride and getting more push. Justin, could you do a couple stops and starts? Good. One more. So when Bob stops, he stops fairly abruptly through his front end. And again, he's keeping his back rigid, so he's a good horse to use for transitions like that. It's going to be a very abrupt movement. You can go ahead and take him through the cones. So now watch Bob's hind legs, especially as he goes through here and tries to bend. He's going to keep his body pretty straight there. So it's a good exercise to take him through the cones, but the rider isn't going to get a whole lot of diagonal movement. He takes short steps with his hind legs around the cone. If you watch the purple leg, and now watch the green leg, instead of getting deeper and driving with bigger steps, he takes a little bit shorter step and lets his front end do a little bit more of the work. So you're not going to get quite as much of the lateral movement from Bob when you choose to use him for ring figures, which can be good for riders that don't need that much of a challenge. We can bring him over the poles, Justin. Good, so there as Justin goes to speed him up, you can see that he just puts his head up and kind of gets faster with his stride, but doesn't lengthen his step. So we're going to try to manipulate that over some poles. Good. Justin, can you take him just back over the poles one more time? So if you watch, SpongeBob does have the ability to lengthen his stride and drive deeper. So the first two poles are set at a longer length, which you can use during your ride to encourage Bob to get more push from behind. So if you watch him step over the first two poles again, watch what his hind legs and his back do. He's really got to step bigger and pick his back up. And then the second two are set a little bit shorter so that you can kind of see what his typical stride is. So that would be a good exercise for Bob with a rider that you don't want a ton of movement in the rotational plane. But if you add some ground poles, you can do it every once in a while throughout the ride. Thank you, Justin.